Welcome back. And now for the news in detail. We start from Pakistan, where 17 people have been killed after a Pakistani military aircraft crashed into a residential building near Islamabad. Officials say the victims include 5 crew members and 12 residents. Another 12 civilians were injured and are undergoing the treatment. The military identified the crew members as 2 colonels and 3 non-commissioned officers. Staying in Pakistan, 24 people have been killed in flash floods and other rain-related incidents across Pakistan. Officials say 16 people died in the port city of Karachi as the first spell of monsoon rain wreaked havoc across the southeastern Sindh province. Medics say the majority of victims were electrocuted by fallen transmission lines in pools of rainwater. Pakistan's Met Department says storms will continue in southeast Pakistan until tomorrow. In northwest Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province, 3 people were killed in a roof collapse while 2 others were electrocuted. 3 children died in flash floods following torrential rains. Moving on to the US, which says it will start withdrawing military forces from Afghanistan next year. US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says President Donald Trump has personally ordered troops' numbers to be reduced by next year's elections. Speaking in Washington, Pompeo expressed hope there would be less need for combat forces in Afghanistan by then. The US is scheduled to hold another round of peace talks with the Taliban in Qatar this week. NATO says 2 US Army personnel have been killed in Afghanistan. It gave no further details and withheld their names. 11 US troops have been killed in Afghanistan this year. The US has 14,000 soldiers stationed in the country as part of the US-led NATO mission to train and assist Afghan forces. Moving on to the UN, which has approved Russia's proposed Gulf Security Organization to consolidate political and diplomatic efforts in the region. The Russian Foreign Ministry says the organization will be tasked with implementing a plan to normalize the Gulf security situation. It says the group will also seek to settle conflicts. The Russian Foreign Minister says work to create a security system in the Persian Gulf will begin soon with a series of diplomatic consultations. They will involve members of the United Nations Security Council, Arab League, Organization of Islamic Cooperation, and the Gulf Cooperation Council. Iran has urged China and other friendly countries to buy more of its oil. According to Chinese Bureau of Statistics, Iranian oil imports have dipped by 60% following US sanctions. Iran's Vice President Ishaq Jahangir says he's aware that these countries face some restrictions. Jahangir told Chinese diplomat Song Tao, who is visiting Tehran, that Iran expects more active trade with Beijing. In Yemen, Houthi rebels say airstrikes have killed 13 civilians in northwestern Sada province. The warring sides blamed each other for the air raid on a market. Medics say 2 children are among the dead. 23 others were wounded in the attack. Saudi Arabia has not yet confirmed the attack. US Senate has failed to override a presidential veto protecting an $8 billion weapons sale to Saudi Arabia. 45 senators, including 5 Republicans, voted to overturn the veto. But with 15 abstentions, the measure fell far short of the required 2/3 majority. Donald Trump has repeatedly argued that blocking the sale of weapons will weaken America's global competitiveness. Now moving on, in Sudan, the opposition has called for nationwide protests after security forces killed 5 students in northern Kordofan state. Authorities imposed a curfew in the city of Al Ubaid after the incident. Protest leaders demanded that the ruling military council immediately agree to a final power transition deal. This comes ahead of a planned talks between Sudan's ruling military and the civilian protest leaders. The 2 sides have already signed a power-sharing deal that aims to set up a joint civilian military ruling authority. Earlier, the opposition rejected the findings of an investigation into a deadly June raid on a sit-in in Khartoum. Protest leaders say the report exonerated the military council from the killings. The United Nations has called for a truce in Libya to mark the Muslim Eid al-Adha holiday. The United Nations envoy for Libya says the warring sides should exchange prisoners and release those arbitrarily detained. He has warned that an influx of weapons from foreign supporters is fueling the conflict in Libya. Flight operations at Libya's Mitiga airport were halted for a few hours after being hit by airstrikes. The attack happened as a plane was preparing to take off for Tunisia. The government forces say they have retaken 2 villages in northwestern Syria. State media says the Syrian army has established full control over the villages of Al-Jabin and Tel Melah in Hama province. Rebel fighters captured Al-Jabin and Tel Melah in earlier June. A rebel commander said opposition fighters have withdrawn from Al-Jabin. Northern Hama and Idlib provinces are dominated by the militant group Tahrir al-Sham. The region is supposed to be protected from a government offensive by a September buffer zone deal, but it has come under increasing fire by Damascus and its Russian ally since the end of April. Over 70,000 people are crammed into the Kurdish-controlled Al-Hol camp in northeastern Syria. Most of them are families of foreign ISIS fighters stuck in the desert, surrounded by barbed wire and armed guards. Children suffer the most. More in this report.
Syrian and Iraqi women are allowed to roam freely in this desolate camp. Female jihadists who joined the militant group from across the world are treated as high-risk prisoners. They are still waiting for the return of the caliphate.
Bahuz is more than 1,000 times better than this camp. At least there we were valued, while here we have been put to burn in the fire of hell.
These women admit to stabbing guards, stoning aid workers, and flying the militant group's black flag. Meanwhile, the jihadists also complain of inhuman conditions in the camps. But it is the children who are most vulnerable to their parents' teachings.
The children of IS fighters throw stones because their mothers tell them that we killed their parents and destroyed their homes, and that's what pushes the children to turn against us and to throw stones at us when they see our uniforms.
Kurdish authorities have warned these children are a ticking time bomb while calling for their rehabilitation and reintegration.
Moving on, 57 inmates have been killed in a prison riot in Brazil's northern Pará state. Prison authorities say 16 inmates were decapitated while others were asphyxiated after parts of the prison were set on fire. Jail officials said gang members from one prison block invaded another part of the Altamira jail. They said the riot lasted for almost 5 hours. 2 officers were taken hostage but have since been freed. Brazil has around 750,000 prisoners, the third most in the world. President Jair Bolsonaro has promised to build more jails and impose tighter controls on them. Colombian President Ivan Duque says his counterpart Nicolas Maduro has turned Venezuela into a terrorist sanctuary. This comes after President Maduro said 2 missing Colombian rebel commanders are welcome in Venezuela. Tensions between Venezuela and Colombia have escalated once again. Colombian authorities believe that the 2 FARC guerrilla leaders are hiding in Venezuela and are being protected by Maduro. President Maduro's government has denied shielding the rebels. Earlier, Maduro called both rebel commanders leaders of peace. FARC commander Ivan Marquez went missing last year after his nephew was arrested and taken to the United States to cooperate with drug trafficking investigators. Earlier this month, the Colombian Supreme Court ordered Jesus Sanchez's arrest after he failed to appear for questioning about U.S. drug trafficking charges. The 52nd ASEAN Foreign Ministers meeting has started in Bangkok. The two-day gathering comes amid growing tensions in the South China Sea. Rising tensions in the South China Sea and the fallout from the US-China trade war are set to dominate talks. The foreign ministers of 10 member states, including major global economies, are at the conference. Australia, China, and the EU and Japan are among those taking part. The foreign ministers of states participating will also hold bilateral talks on the sidelines of the meeting. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says he hopes working-level discussions to revive denuclearization talks with North Korea will begin soon. But Pompeo emphasized a follow-up summit of the leaders is not planned. Pompeo was speaking at the Economics Club of Washington a day before he travels to Asia. He says another summit between President Donald Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has not been planned. Pompeo and North Korean Foreign Minister Ri Yong-ho are expected to meet in Bangkok this week. A February summit in Vietnam between Trump and Kim collapsed after the two sides failed to reconcile differences. 5 people have been killed and 2 others wounded in Wisconsin in the third mass shooting to hit the U.S. in 2 days. Police say the shooter murdered the 3 members of a family at their home in a small Wisconsin town. After that, he went to another home nearby and opened fire. Police officers found the gunman and another person dead when they reached the scene. This comes hours after 4 people were shot dead and 12 others wounded at a shooting in California festival. More stories to follow right after a short break. Stay tuned with Indus. Welcome back. In Greece, the newly elected government has decided to propose legislation this week to scrap academic sanctuary. Under the 1982 asylum law, police are barred from entering university premises. The law was designed to protect protesting students, but the government believes it is being used as a cover for lawlessness. The law has also been revoked and reinstated by different governments in the past. Moving on to Bangladesh, which is in the grip of its worst ever dengue outbreak. 8 people have died and over 13,000 dengue cases have been registered so far this year. Official figures say 11,000 people, including children, have been diagnosed with dengue fever in the last 24 hours. Health Ministry officials say hospitals are overflowing with patients and social media is flooded with pleas for blood donors. The capital Dhaka is the worst hit, with authorities launching a fumigation drive to control the epidemic. The World Health Organization says dengue can be deadly if it develops into hemorrhagic fever. There is no vaccine or specific medicine to treat dengue. Moving on to Jordan, where the first underwater military museum in the city of Aqaba has become the talk of the town. Tanks, helicopters, and an ambulance can be found resting on the seabed near the city. It is hoped the project will also have environmental benefits. More in this report.
19 military vehicles were submerged near Aqaba's coastline to attract tourists. The city's special economic zone hopes the underwater museum will promote tourism in the city. At the same time, it would draw tourists away from under-pressure coral reefs elsewhere.
Marine biodiversity in this area is relatively small. There aren't many coral reefs. They are not varied. Placing these military vehicles in this location will allow coral reefs, corals, as well as marine life, including fish, to find a safe sanctuary, enabling them to live and procreate in. Also, corals will grow on these military pieces. We predict that in about a year or so, we will see a beautiful sight.
Some of the military vehicles have settled at only 15 to 20 meters under the surface. Others have gone as deep as 20 to 30 meters. Aqaba residents have expressed interest in the new attraction.
As soon as they hear, especially Aqaba residents, as soon as they hear about this, they are going to grab their mask and come to see the beautiful views. Now, after a short period of time, this will be filled filled with colorful fish. There is a tank out there that looks beautiful. We often go see it.
Tourism is one of Jordan's main sources of revenue, accounting for 10% of its GDP. The country is now looking to supplement this figure with attractions like these.
Well, a church in Cairo has been decorated with sculptures and inscriptions by Polish artist Mario. He has spent 30 of his 52 years carving images at the Church of St. Simon the Tanner, which is set into a cave. But this report tells us more.
This is the St. Simon the Tanner Monastery and Church Complex in Cairo. It sits on top of and inside Mokattam Mountain in the city's poor garbage collectors district. The church is popular, and 52-year-old Polish artist Mario might be one reason why. He's made decorating this site his life's work. He started young and with no experience.
I believe that God gifted me with this talent for sculpture. I was so young when I started. I was 18. I wanted to do something that would bring me closer to God.
The idea was to tell the story of St. Simon the Tanner, a 10th century monk who moved Mokattam Mountain to prove the strength of his faith. Mario, real name Mariusz Dybic, has carved scenes from the Bible and the life of St. Simon into the living rock. It can take anything between 5 days and 6 months to complete a design. The carvings have a message.
Our message is to let people understand that we are not helping statues to be worshipped. We are telling history through biblical art.
His work sits in a long tradition of sculpture in the region. The fruits of his labours are expected to last thousands of years.
Preschool cartoon character Dora is set to hit the big screen in August in her first live-action adventure. Called Dora and the Lost City of Gold, the movie gives audiences of all ages a chance to see the character. More details in this report.
Dora the Explorer was 7 years old when she made her television debut. She travels the world seeking answers and solving puzzles. The popular animated TV series has now been turned into a live-action adaptation. Played by Isabella Moner, Dora embarks on a quest to save her parents and solve the mystery behind a lost city of gold.
Her unshakable nature of being herself and just the way that she is, and she doesn't let anybody tell her what to do. She's always herself, and she trusts that. So that's good.
Dora and the Lost City of Gold has been pieced together to provide a role model for children. Apart from adventure, the movie demonstrates diversity and multiculturalism.
I was always complaining that they portray Latinos in a bad way in every single Hollywood movie. They always portray us as criminals, drug lords, narcos, and this is the first time that we are going to be able to see a movie about Latinos that could be a role model for kids all around the world.
Dora and the Lost City of Gold will hit theaters next month.
Lows and the highs of the business world now. Stock markets in Asia Pacific are trading higher ahead of the trade talks between the US and China. Indices were also spurred by expectations of a US interest rate cut later in the week. The Nikkei 225 is up after the Bank of Japan kept its low interest rates unchanged. Investors barely reacted to the worst industrial output data in 18 months. The Bank of Japan said factory output sank by 3.6% in June, well below the forecast 2%. Mainland Chinese shares and Hong Kong's Hang Seng are also in a positive territory. South Korea's Kospi recovered from Monday's losses, led a 1% gain by index heavyweight Samsung Electronics. In Australia, the ASX 200 has gained fractionally. And now the weather situation from around the globe. That's all for now. For further updates, stay tuned to Indus News.